He asked me to swap places with my sister for his reunion. His brother asked me to swap for life. Derek had this way of making ridiculous requests sound reasonable, like he was asking me to pick up milk instead of commit identity fraud. We were sitting in traffic on our way home from work when he turned down the radio and said the words that would unravel everything. So my 15-year high school reunion is coming up next month, and I was thinking Vanessa should come with me instead of you. I kept my hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, eyes forward, waiting for the punchline. Vanessa was my younger sister by 3 years, objectively more conventionally attractive, objectively more fun at parties, objectively unemployed for the past 18 months while I paid her student loans because she couldn't find work that fulfilled her creative spirit. Derek was still talking like he hadn't just suggested I loan out my identity for the evening. Remember that summer barbecue at my buddy Connor's place? The one where your whole family came? Everyone thought Vanessa was my girlfriend because we were talking by the grill for like an hour. I never corrected them because it seemed easier than explaining the whole sister situation. The light turned green and I pressed the gas pedal with deliberate calm. You've been lying to your friends for how many years? He waved his hand dismissively. Not lying, just not clarifying. And honestly, it worked out because they all think I married up. Connor keeps saying he can't believe I landed someone like that. Someone like that. Not someone like me, apparently. I merged onto the highway and kept my voice level. So, your solution is to bring Vanessa to your reunion and have her pretend to be your wife for the night. He reached over and squeezed my knee like he was comforting me through my own confusion. It's really not a big deal, babe. These people don't matter to our actual lives. You'll never meet them. And honestly, you'd hate it anyway. You know how you get at networking events, all stiff and formal. Vanessa knows how to work a room. The casual cruelty of it landed softly, the way it always did with Derek. Never quite mean enough to call him out on, always just plausible enough to make me question whether I was overreacting. I'd been with Derek for 7 years, married for 4. I was the one who bought our condo after saving for 3 years while he figured out his career path. I was the one with the stable job at the architecture firm while he bounced between startups that always collapsed right before his equity vested. I was the one who paid for Vanessa's life because Derek said family was important and we should help her get on her feet. And now I was apparently the one who wasn't pretty enough to show off at his high school reunion. What did Vanessa say when you asked her? I kept my tone neutral, journalistic, like I was gathering facts for a case study. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. She thought it was funny. She said she'd do it if you were cool with it. Of course she did. Vanessa had spent her entire life getting by on charm and other people's money, mine specifically. I'd been funding her apartment in the arts district for a year and a half, covering her car payment when she couldn't, sending her money for groceries when her social media management gigs didn't materialize into actual paychecks. We pulled into our parking spot and Derek got out without waiting for my response, like my agreement was inevitable. I sat in the car for 5 minutes after he went upstairs, hands still on the wheel, breathing slowly through my nose. Through the rearview mirror, I could see my reflection. 32 years old, master's degree in architecture, senior project manager at a firm that designed buildings people would use for generations, but not pretty enough to be Derek's wife at a party where appearance was the only metric that mattered. I grabbed my work bag and went inside. Derek was already on the couch scrolling through his phone, shoes kicked off, remote within reach. The apartment we lived in had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors I'd chosen myself, furniture I'd saved for and selected piece by piece. He contributed to the utilities and occasionally bought groceries, usually the expensive organic kind that made him feel virtuous but barely lasted a week. So are you okay with it? He asked without looking up from his screen. I set my bag down carefully. With you taking my sister to your reunion instead of your actual wife? Now he looked up, and his face did that thing where he pretended to be hurt by my reasonable questions. Don't make it sound like that. I'm not taking her on a date. She's just helping me save face with some people I haven't seen in 15 years. It's a favor, basically. A favor where my sister pretends to be me and I stay home alone on a Saturday night while my husband parades her around as his spouse. What happens when they ask about your life? Your job? Where you live? Derek shrugged. We'll figure it out. Vanessa's smart. She can improvise. Vanessa was many things, but prepared wasn't one of them. I could already picture it. Her laughing off questions about my career with vague answers. Derek jumping in to steer conversations away from anything substantive. They'd probably have a great time. I went to the kitchen and started making dinner because that's what I did every night after working 10 hours. Derek stayed on the couch because that's what he did every night after working 6. While I chopped vegetables, I tried to logic my way through his request. Maybe he was right. Maybe these people didn't matter. Maybe I was being oversensitive about the whole thing. Maybe this was just one of those harmless lies people tell to avoid complicated explanations. But every time I tried to convince myself it was fine, I kept coming back to one detail. He'd asked Vanessa before asking me. He'd lined up his fake wife before checking whether his real wife had a problem with it. That meant he'd anticipated I might say no, which meant he knew on some level that what he was asking was wrong. and he'd decided to do it anyway, to stack the deck, to make me the unreasonable one for objecting to a plan that was already in motion. Dinner was ready 20 minutes later. I called Derek to the table and we ate in silence. Or rather, he ate while scrolling through his phone and I ate while planning my next move. Because I'd already decided I wasn't going to say no. I was going to say yes and then make sure I had a front row seat to whatever disaster he was creating. Okay, I said, setting down my fork. Derek looked up, surprised. Okay, what? Okay, Vanessa can go to your reunion, but I want to help you two prepare. If she's going to be me for the night, she should probably know some basic facts about our relationship. He brightened immediately. Really? You're cool with it? I didn't say I was cool with it. I said I'd help. If you're going to lie to your friends, at least lie competently. He came around the table and hugged me from behind, kissing the top of my head. You're the best, you know that? I'll make it up to you. I promise. The promises Derek made were like paper boats, pretty and optimistic and completely unable to withstand any real pressure. But I smiled and nodded and told him to finish his dinner. That night, while he snored beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and feeling something shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak, exactly. More like clarity. For 7 years, I'd been telling myself that Derek's flaws were manageable, that his lack of ambition was actually a refreshing rejection of hustle culture, that his casual disregard for my feelings was just him being low-key and chill. But watching him sleep peacefully after asking me to loan out my identity to my own sister, I finally saw him clearly. He didn't respect me. He probably never had. And I'd been so busy making everything easy for him that I'd forgotten to ask whether I respected him either. The answer, I discovered at 2 a.m. in the expensive condo I'd bought with my own money, was number 1. I didn't respect him at all. The first rehearsal happened on Wednesday evening. Vanessa showed up at 6 with takeout and a bottle of wine. Like this was a fun girls' night instead of a systematic erasure of my existence. She hugged me at the door with her usual enthusiasm, smelling like expensive perfume I knew she couldn't afford, which meant I'd probably paid for it indirectly through one of her crisis loans that never got repaid. Derek was already in the living room with a list of potential questions his friends might ask. He'd put actual thought into this, which was more effort than he'd put into our anniversary last year. Okay, so first thing they'll probably ask is how we met, Derek said, looking at Vanessa with an intensity he hadn't directed at me in years. I was thinking we'd say we met at that summer barbecue, which is technically true. We hit it off immediately, started dating right after, got married 2 years later. I sat in the armchair across from them, watching Vanessa nod along like she was memorizing lines for a play. What about the proposal? Vanessa asked, leaning forward. They'll definitely ask about that. Derek glanced at me quickly, then back to her. We'll keep it simple. Rooftop dinner. Surprised you with the ring, you cried. The whole restaurant applauded. My hands clenched on the armrests. That was our proposal. Not the exact location. Derek had actually proposed during a hike when I was sweaty and unprepared and didn't have my camera ready. But the story he was giving Vanessa was the proposal I'd told him I wished I'd had. Late one night after too much wine when I'd admitted I'd always imagined something more romantic. And now he was gifting that fantasy to my sister. That's so sweet, Vanessa said. And she sounded genuine. Where was the restaurant? Derek didn't know. He'd never taken me to a rooftop restaurant. He was improvising off my own daydream. That place downtown, he said vaguely. The one with the view. We should be more specific, I said. And they both looked at me like they'd forgotten I was there. If his friends ask follow-up questions, you need details. The restaurant had floor-to-ceiling windows on the west side. You could see the river. There was a pianist playing jazz standards. Vanessa pulled out her phone and started taking notes. This is so helpful. What else? Everything else, apparently. For the next 2 hours, I fed them my life. I told them about our first anniversary trip to the mountains, except I upgraded it to the beach vacation Derek had promised but never delivered. I told them about the time Derek surprised me at work with flowers, except in reality, he'd forgotten my birthday and shown up with gas station roses the next day. I gave them the relationship I'd wanted instead of the one I had, and they absorbed every detail like it was their origin story. Derek kept glancing at me with this grateful expression, like I was being so mature and understanding. Vanessa kept saying things like, "You two are such an inspiration," without a trace of irony, and I kept smiling and offering better lies, knowing that each one was another nail in whatever coffin I was building. What about kids? Vanessa asked. Are people going to ask if we're planning to have them? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Kids were a sore subject. I'd wanted them 2 years ago. He'd said we should wait until his career stabilized, which was code for never since his career was in a permanent state of almost but not quite working out. We're focusing on our careers right now, Derek said. Maybe in a few years. Vanessa wrote it down. Got it. Career-focused couple. What do I do for work? The question hung in the air. Derek looked at me, and I looked at him, and Vanessa looked between us. I'm an architect, I said slowly. Senior project manager at Morton & Associates. Right, but Vanessa scrunched up her nose. I don't know anything about architecture. What if someone asks me details? Tell them you work in marketing, Derek said quickly. That's vague enough that you can fake it. So I wouldn't even get to keep my career in this fantasy version of my life. I'd spent 8 years in school and 7 years climbing the ranks at my firm. And Derek was swapping it out for marketing because Vanessa couldn't be bothered to learn 5 basic facts about structural design. Actually, I said, keeping my voice level, keep the architecture. I'll teach her enough to handle basic questions. It'll be more believable. Derek frowned. That seems complicated. My entire job is complicated. If she's going to be me, she should put in the effort to do it right. I looked at Vanessa. Unless you don't think you can handle it? She straightened up immediately. No, I can totally handle it. I want to do this right. For the next 30 minutes, I gave her a crash course in architecture. Load-bearing walls, sustainable design, commercial versus residential projects. She absorbed about 40% of it and faked comprehension on the rest. But she was trying, which was more than Derek was doing. He kept checking his phone and interjecting with comments about how his friends wouldn't care about the technical stuff. They'll care if she says something obviously wrong and makes you look stupid, I pointed out. Or is that the goal here? To show up with a pretty woman who can't hold a conversation about her supposed career? Derek's face flushed. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He stood up abruptly. I'm getting a beer. Anyone else want one? Neither of us answered. He disappeared into the kitchen, and Vanessa and I sat in silence. Are you really okay with this? She asked quietly. Because if you're not, I can back out. I don't want to cause problems between you guys. It would have been easier if she was malicious. If she was deliberately trying to steal my husband or ruin my marriage, I could hate her cleanly. But Vanessa was just thoughtless, taking whatever was offered without considering the cost to anyone else. The same way she'd been taking my money for 18 months without considering that every check I wrote to cover her rent was money I couldn't save for my own future. I'm fine, I lied. Just make sure you get the details right. Derek's reputation depends on it. She nodded seriously, like she was being entrusted with something important instead of being asked to impersonate me at a party I wasn't invited to. Derek came back with 3 beers even though nobody had said yes, and we continued the rehearsal. They practiced their body language, how they'd stand next to each other, whether they'd hold hands. Derek put his arm around Vanessa's waist to demonstrate, and she leaned into him naturally, like they'd done this before. Maybe they had. Maybe all those times Derek gave Vanessa rides home from family dinners, all those inside jokes they'd developed, all those texts I'd seen flash across his screen that he dismissed as just checking in, maybe all of it had been leading here, to this moment where my husband held my sister close and I sat across the room directing their performance. That looks good, I said, and my voice sounded far away. Natural, like you've been together for years. They practiced their story about how Derek proposed. Vanessa pretended to be surprised and touched, gasping at the imaginary ring. Derek got down on one knee right there in our living room, and I watched him propose to my sister using words he'd never said to me. The real proposal had been rushed, distracted. He'd pulled out the ring during a hike and said something like, "So, should we make this official?" I'd said yes because I loved him, or thought I did, or was too deep into the relationship to back out without feeling like I'd wasted my 20s. But this proposal, the fake one for Vanessa, was everything I'd secretly wanted. Romantic, planned, full of words about love and partnership and building a future together. Beautiful, I said when he finished, and I meant it. The proposal was beautiful. The whole situation was hideous. Vanessa left around 9, hugging us both goodbye like we just had a normal, fun evening. Derek closed the door behind her and turned to me with a satisfied smile. That went really well. Thanks for helping. I know this is probably weird for you. Probably. Weird. Like I was being slightly irrational about my husband taking my sister to an event as his fake wife. I'm going to bed, I said. Got an early meeting tomorrow. I left him in the living room and went upstairs to our bedroom. The room I'd painted myself because Derek said hiring painters was a waste of money. The bed I'd bought because Derek said his old futon was fine, but I wanted something more adult. The curtains I'd hung because Derek never got around to it. Evidence of my life, my choices, my money, everywhere I looked. And none of it was enough to make him want to bring me to his reunion. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Julian, Derek's older brother. They hadn't spoken in almost 3 years, not since Julian had called Derek out at Thanksgiving for treating me like a meal ticket. The fight had been spectacular, ending with Derek storming out and me apologizing to Julian for ruining the holiday. But Julian had pulled me aside before I left and said something I'd never forgotten. You're too good for him. You know that, right? You could do so much better. At the time, I'd laughed it off, defended Derek, made excuses about him finding his path and needing support. Now, sitting alone in my bedroom while my husband planned to parade my sister around as his wife, Julian's words echoed differently. I opened a new message and typed quickly before I could talk myself out of it. Hey, Julian, I know it's been a while. Would you be free for coffee this week? I need advice about something, and you're the only person I trust to be honest with me. I hit send and set the phone down. heart racing. This was insane. I was reaching out to my brother-in-law for advice about my husband, but Derek had made his choice when he asked Vanessa to be his fake wife. Now I was making mine. The response came faster than I expected. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., the cafe on 5th. And Iris, whatever's going on, I'm here for you. I stared at my phone for a long time before responding with a simple thumbs up. Downstairs, I could hear Derek laughing at something on TV, completely unaware that I'd just taken the first step toward dismantling everything he thought he could take for granted. The next morning, I told Derek I had an early breakfast meeting with a client. He barely looked up from his cereal, just nodded and went back to scrolling through his phone. I drove to the cafe on 5th and found Julian already there, 2 coffees on the table. He stood when he saw me, and I was struck by how different he looked from Derek. Same basic features, but Julian had a groundedness his brother lacked. At 38, he'd built a successful consulting firm from nothing, owned his house outright, and from what I'd heard through family gossip, was recently divorced but handling it with maturity and grace. Everything Derek aspired to be but would never achieve because that required actual effort. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Of course. You look stressed." He pushed one of the coffees toward me. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The reunion, the request, Vanessa agreeing, the rehearsals in my living room where I fed them my fantasies and watched them build a fake relationship using pieces of my real one. Julian's expression darkened as I talked, his jaw tightening every time I mentioned something particularly egregious. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus Christ," he finally said. "Even for Derek, this is a new low." "Is it, though? Really?" I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. "Or is this just who he's always been and I was too busy making excuses to notice?" Julian leaned back against the booth. "You want me to be honest? That's why I'm here. Derek has been coasting on other people's work his entire life. Our parents, his friends, you, especially you. He's never had to develop actual character because there's always been someone there to catch him when he falls." He paused. "And you've been catching him for 7 years." The words should have hurt, but they felt more like relief, like someone finally naming the thing I'd been too afraid to admit. "So what do I do?" "That depends. Do you want to save this marriage or end it?" I took a sip of coffee, buying time. Did I want to save it? The question itself revealed the answer. If I had to ask, the marriage was already over. "I don't know yet," I said carefully. "But I know I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being treated like I'm interchangeable with my sister. Like my only value is my paycheck." Julian drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. "The reunion is when? 2.5 weeks from now?" "Yeah, Saturday the 23rd. Why?" "Because I have an idea, if you're interested." He leaned forward. "A way to make Derek understand exactly what he's been taking for granted." "I'm listening." "Let him go to the reunion with Vanessa. Let him have his perfect night with his fake wife, and you show up with me as your date." The suggestion hit me like cold water. "You want to crash Derek's reunion?" "I want to show him that you have options, that you're not just sitting at home waiting for him to remember you exist." "And honestly," Julian smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "I want to watch his face when he realizes his brother is there with his actual wife while he's parading around with your sister." It was petty. It was dramatic. It was exactly the kind of scene Derek would hate because it would expose his lies in front of everyone he was trying to impress. "He'd never forgive you," I said. "We already don't speak. I've got nothing to lose." He met my eyes. "But you need to be sure. This isn't a small thing. Once you do this, there's no going back to how things were. How things were. Me working 60 hours a week to pay for a life Derek barely participated in. Me making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Me accepting crumbs and calling it a meal." "I'm sure," I said. "Then we have a plan." We spent the next hour plotting details. When we'd arrive, what we'd wear, how we'd handle the inevitable confrontation. Julian knew all Derek's old friends from years of family gatherings. He knew who to talk to, which buttons to push, exactly how to make Derek's perfect night implode. "One thing, though," Julian said as we were leaving, "you need to be prepared for what comes after. Derek's going to lose his mind. And Vanessa," he trailed off. "Vanessa made her choice when she agreed to impersonate me," I said. "I've spent 18 months funding her life. I'm done." Julian pulled me into a hug, and I let myself lean into it. When was the last time Derek had hugged me like this? Like I was something precious that needed protecting? I couldn't remember. The next 2 weeks passed in a surreal fog. I continued helping Derek and Vanessa rehearse, feeding them better lies, polishing their story until it gleamed. Derek thought I was being supportive. Vanessa thought I was being generous. Neither of them noticed that I'd stopped wearing my wedding ring, except when Derek was looking directly at me. Julian and I texted constantly, refining our plan. He'd pick me up at 7 on the night of the reunion. We'd arrive fashionably late, make an entrance. He'd introduce me to Derek's friends as his date before Derek even knew we were there. By the time my husband realized what was happening, it would be too late to control the narrative. I bought a new dress for the occasion. Red, which Derek had always said was too bold for me. Form-fitting, which Derek had said wasn't my style. Expensive, charged to my personal credit card that Derek didn't have access to. I got my hair done professionally, a sleek updo that made me look powerful instead of pretty. When I looked in the mirror the night of the reunion, I barely recognized myself. This woman looked like she could eat men like Derek for breakfast and not even notice the bones. Derek texted me around 5 to say he was picking up Vanessa. Don't wait up, might be late. With a winking emoji because apparently infidelity was funny when it was this indirect. I texted back a casual, have fun, and immediately deleted the thread. Julian picked me up at 7 exactly. He was in a perfectly tailored suit, his dark hair styled, his cologne subtle and expensive. When I opened the door, his eyes widened. Wow, Derek's an idiot. I know. Let's go remind him. The reunion was at a hotel downtown, the same place I'd heard Derek and Vanessa gushing about during rehearsals. $25 valet parking, open bar, a DJ playing hits from their graduation year, the kind of party that tried too hard to prove everyone had made it. Julian handed his keys to the valet and offered me his arm. Ready? Absolutely. We walked into the ballroom together, and I saw them immediately. Derek and Vanessa by the bar, her hand on his arm, him laughing at something one of his friends said. She was wearing the emerald dress they'd picked out together, her hair in loose waves, looking every bit the successful man's beautiful wife. They hadn't seen us yet. Give it a minute, Julian murmured. Let them get comfortable. We got drinks and circulated. Julian knew several people there, friends of Derek's who'd met him at family events over the years. They greeted him warmly, asked about his business, his divorce, his life, and then they noticed me. Iris? Connor, Derek's best friend from high school, stared at me in confusion. What are you doing here? Hi, Connor. Julian invited me. I sipped my drink casually. It's been so long since I've been to one of these things. But I thought... Connor's eyes darted across the room to where Derek and Vanessa were standing. I thought Vanessa was... Vanessa is my sister, I said clearly. I'm Derek's wife. You know, the one he's been married to for 4 years? The color drained from Connor's face. Oh shit. Yeah. Julian's hand was on my back, warm and steady. Oh shit is right. Does Derek know you're here? Connor asked. Not yet, but he's about to. Right on cue, Derek turned and saw us. I watched the realization hit him in stages. First confusion seeing Julian at his reunion, then recognition seeing me, then absolute horror as his brain processed what this meant. He grabbed Vanessa's arm and started moving toward us, weaving through the crowd. His face had gone pale except for 2 bright red spots on his cheeks. When he reached us, his voice came out strangled. What the hell are you doing here? Hello to you too, little brother, Julian said pleasantly. Nice party. Very nostalgic. I'm asking Iris. Derek's eyes were wild. Why are you here with Julian? He invited me. I thought it would be fun to meet your friends since you've been talking about them so much lately. I gestured toward Vanessa, who looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Hi, Vanessa. Nice dress. Iris, I can explain, Derek started, but Connor cut him off. Actually, Derek, I think we need an explanation from you. You told everyone Vanessa was your wife. We've been thinking that for years. More people were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Derek's other friends, their wives and girlfriends, everyone who'd believed his lie for however long he'd been telling it. This is Iris, Julian said to the growing crowd. Derek's actual wife. She's a senior project manager at Morton & Associates. She bought their condo, pays their bills, and has been funding their life for years while Derek figured out his career. She also pays for my apartment, Vanessa added quietly, like confessing to a priest, and my car insurance, and pretty much everything else. The crowd went silent. Someone's phone was recording. Derek's face cycled through several emotions before landing on rage. You planned this, he hissed at me. You set me up. No, you set yourself up. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. I turned to address the crowd. For anyone wondering, Derek asked me to stay home tonight so Vanessa could pretend to be me. He said his friends wouldn't understand that he married the less attractive sister, the boring one who works all the time. That's not what I said, Derek protested weakly. That's exactly what you said. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd made during one of our rehearsals, my voice asking why he needed Vanessa instead of me. His voice responding with all the casual cruelty about his friends being shallow, about needing someone who could work a room, about me being the other one. The recording played through the speakers I'd synced to my phone, and the entire room heard it. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Derek looked around at his friends, at their disgusted faces, and seemed to shrink. I need to go, Vanessa said suddenly. I need to not be here. She pushed through the crowd and disappeared toward the exit. Derek didn't go after her. He was too busy trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Look, I know how this sounds, but you guys don't understand. Iris and I have had problems for a while. I was just trying to save face and, by making your wife complicit in her own erasure, Julian's voice was sharp, by asking her to help you cheat on her with her own sister, I wasn't cheating. Nothing physical happened. Yet, I added. Nothing physical happened yet, but you were planning to, weren't you? After tonight, when Vanessa was all dressed up and playing your wife and you were both high on the fantasy, you were going to make it real. Derek's silence was answer enough. Connor stepped forward, and his expression was disgusted. I can't believe you, man. All these years, we thought you had this amazing marriage, this perfect life, and you've been lying to everyone, including the woman who's been supporting you. Supporting isn't the same as controlling, Derek tried, but his voice lacked conviction. She's not controlling. She's surviving being married to you. Julian moved slightly in front of me, protective. And now she's done. I hadn't said I was done, hadn't made that declaration yet, but hearing Julian say it out loud made something inside me settle into certainty. Yes, I was done. I was finished catching Derek when he fell, finished making excuses for his failures, finished pretending his cruelty was just carelessness. You can't just decide that, Derek said, looking at me now with something like panic. We're married. We made vows. You broke them first. The second you asked Vanessa to wear your ring. I pulled my actual wedding ring from my clutch and set it on the bar next to us. Keep it. Or give it to her. I don't care anymore. Iris, wait. Can we talk about this privately? No. You wanted a public performance, so we're doing this publicly? You wanted everyone to think you married Vanessa? Fine. Now they all know the truth. You're a liar who married a woman way too good for you, spent 7 years taking advantage of her generosity, and then tried to replace her with her own sister because you were embarrassed by the reality of your life. I took a breath. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. You have 2 weeks to move out of my condo. After that, I'm changing the locks. The crowd murmured. Phone cameras were definitely recording now. This would be all over social media before the night ended. Derek's reputation, the one he'd worked so hard to curate, was destroyed. You're making a mistake, he said desperately. Where are you going to find someone who puts up with your shit like I do? Your impossible standards, your need to control everything, your complete inability to just relax? She'll find someone who appreciates her instead of tolerates her, Julian said. Someone who sees her as a partner instead of a piggy bank. Someone who doesn't ask his wife to loan out her identity because he's ashamed of her. Derek's hands clenched into fists. This is about you, isn't it? You've always wanted her. You've been waiting for a chance to move in. I've been waiting for her to realize she deserves better, Julian corrected. Whether that's me or someone else, it doesn't matter, as long as it's not you. So you're what? Together now? You're going to date my wife? Ex-wife soon, I clarified. And what Julian and I do is none of your business anymore. I picked up my clutch and Julian's hand found mine, warm and solid. Enjoy the rest of your reunion, Derek. I hope it was worth it. We walked out together while Derek stood frozen at the bar, his friends staring at him, his perfect night demolished. In the lobby, Vanessa was crying on a bench. She looked up when she heard our footsteps. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I didn't realize how bad this was. Yes, you did. You just didn't care because I was paying for everything. I stopped walking but didn't let go of Julian's hand. The payments stop tomorrow, all of them. You have until the end of the month to figure out your own rent. But I can't afford. Then get a job. Any job. Stop waiting for life to accommodate your creative spirit and start accommodating your own bills. I paused. And Vanessa, don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my door. We're done. No more chances. No more loans. No more sisterhood. You wanted Derek? You can have him. Just don't expect me to fund it. We left her there and walked to Julian's car. He opened my door, then got in beside me. We sat in silence for a moment, the engine idling, both of us processing what had just happened. How do you feel? Julian asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Free, I said finally. Like I've been holding my breath for 7 years and can finally exhale. Good. He put the car in gear. Now what? Now I go home, pack Derek's things, and put them outside the door. Then I order pizza, drink wine, and sleep in the middle of my own bed. I looked at him. Want to help? With which part? All of it. Julian smiled, and it transformed his whole face. I thought you'd never ask. We drove back to my condo and I let us in. The place looked different already, like I was seeing it as it actually was instead of through the lens of who I'd been pretending to be. Julian found boxes in the storage unit while I started pulling Derek's clothes from the closet, his shoes from the rack, his toiletries from the bathroom. Every physical reminder of him went into boxes with methodical efficiency. It took 2 hours to erase 7 years. When we finished, the boxes were stacked by the door, and the condo felt bigger somehow, lighter. Julian was in the kitchen when I found him, pulling wine glasses from the cabinet like he'd been here 100 times before. Pizza should be here in 20 minutes, he said, pouring generous glasses of red wine. I got your favorite, mushroom and basil, extra cheese. How do you know my favorite pizza? Because unlike my brother, I pay attention. He handed me a glass. To new beginnings, I clinked my glass against his. To freedom. We drank, and the wine was good. Expensive. Nothing like the cheap bottles Derek always bought despite having no income to actually pay for them. We talked about everything. His divorce, my marriage, the years we'd wasted on people who didn't deserve us. Somewhere around midnight, after the pizza was gone, and we'd opened a second bottle of wine, Julian asked the question I'd been avoiding. So what happens now? With us? I set down my glass and looked at him. Really looked at him. At 38, he was handsome in a way Derek would never be, carved by actual responsibility instead of coasting on genetics and charm. But more than that, he was kind, present, the kind of person who remembered pizza orders and coffee preferences and small details that added up to genuine care. I don't know, I admitted. I just blew up my marriage tonight. I'm probably not ready for whatever this could be. That's fair. He didn't look disappointed. I can wait. I've waited 3 years already. What's a few more months? Is that what you've been doing? Waiting? From the moment Derek brought you to Thanksgiving and I watched him ignore you all night while you made sure everyone else was happy? Julian smiled sadly. Yeah, I've been waiting, hoping you'd wake up and see what I saw. That you're extraordinary and he's barely mediocre on his best day. The words should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, they settled around me like a warm blanket. I'm going to need time, I said. Time to figure out who I am without Derek. Time to remember what I want instead of what I'm supposed to want. Take all the time you need. He stood up and collected the wine glasses. I'm not going anywhere. Julian left around 1 a.m, but not before making sure all the locks were changed digitally through my security system and helping me screenshot all the financial records I'd need for the divorce. Practical, thoughtful, everything Derek never was. I went to bed alone in my condo, in my bed, with nobody expecting me to make myself smaller. My phone buzzed with texts throughout the night. Derek, apologizing and raging and bargaining by turns. Vanessa, begging for another chance. My mother, who Vanessa had called to tell her version of events. I ignored them all. Sunday morning, I woke to someone pounding on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Derek, disheveled and desperate. Iris, please, open the door. We need to talk. I didn't answer. Just stood there watching him realize I wasn't going to engage. After 10 minutes, he gave up and left. The boxes stayed on the doorstep for 3 days before he finally came to collect them. And by then, I'd already hired a divorce lawyer. The proceedings moved faster than I expected. Derek tried to claim he deserved spousal support since he'd supported my career by managing the household. My lawyer presented evidence that he'd been unemployed for significant portions of our marriage while I paid all expenses. His lawyer tried to argue the condo should be split 50-50. My lawyer showed the deed with only my name, the mortgage I'd paid alone, the paper trail proving Derek had contributed virtually nothing. By the time we reached the settlement conference, Derek's lawyer was advising him to take whatever deal I offered. I offered nothing. He'd get his clothes, his car that I'd stopped paying for, and 30 days to clear out completely. No alimony, no property division, no cash settlement. He'd brought nothing into the marriage except charm and excuses. He'd leave with the same. The divorce was final 4 months after the reunion. I went to the courthouse alone, signed the papers, and walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. Vanessa tried to reconcile 3 times. Once through my mother, once through a long email I deleted without reading, once by showing up at my office. Security escorted her out, and I never heard from her again. I heard through family gossip that she and Derek dated for 6 weeks after the reunion before it fell apart. Turned out neither of them had any money, and poverty wasn't as romantic as they'd imagined. Derek moved back in with his parents. Vanessa found a roommate situation and a job at a retail store. Last I heard, they weren't speaking. Meanwhile, Julian and I took things slowly. Coffee dates that turned into dinners. Dinners that turned into weekend trips. Weekend trips that turned into him keeping clothes at my place and me keeping toiletries at his. 6 months after my divorce was final, he asked if I'd consider moving in together. Not into his place or mine, but somewhere new. A fresh start for both of us. We found a house in the suburbs, big enough for both our lives, with a yard and good light and space for me to paint. Space for him to work from home. Space for us to build something that belonged to neither of our pasts. The day we moved in, Julian gave me a key attached to a handmade keychain. To new beginnings, he said. For real this time. For real, I agreed. We christened the house with takeout and cheap wine because Julian insisted we save the good stuff for when we had furniture. We sat on the floor of the empty living room and talked about the future we'd build together, and for the first time in years I felt excited instead of resigned. A year later, Derek sent me a Facebook friend request. I declined. Vanessa sent me a wedding invitation, having apparently rebounded into an engagement with some guy I'd never heard of. I deleted it. My mother called to say I was being petty and holding grudges. I told her that self-preservation wasn't a grudge, and maybe if she'd taught Vanessa accountability instead of enabling her, we'd all be better off. She hung up on me. I didn't call back. 2 years after the reunion that changed everything, Julian proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or during a staged moment. Just on a regular Thursday evening while we were making dinner together in our kitchen. Marry me, he said, And it wasn't a question. It was a promise, a declaration that he already knew the answer. I said yes without hesitation. We got married on a Tuesday afternoon at the courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses, then went for tacos because tradition was overrated and we were writing our own story. No drama, no performative romance, no lies about who we were or what we wanted. Just 2 people who'd found each other after wading through other people's wreckage, choosing each other with clear eyes and full hearts.